In northern Greece and the nearby Balkan, Iron Age lasted longer than in southern Greece, probably until the 6th century or even in the first decades of the 5th. This last part is classified as late Iron Age. The Iron Age spatial organization, the Thermaic Gulf region, follows a particular pattern. The settlement is extended on tables and then necropolis in the lowland area. An assemblage of imported Attic finds is included in late Iron Age graves. Unfortunately, the archaic cemetery of Sidlos is the only fully published necropolis at present. A limited number of findings from other necropolis, Agia Paraskevi, Karabournaki, etc., are discussed in various articles and dissertations. Therefore, the awareness that the available data is only a fraction of the overall Attic imports and their co-finds is of great significance. The present study, commencing with a brief presentation of the Iron Age cemeteries, will attempt to evaluate statistically the effect of the Attic imported vases on the regional burial customs through three aspects. A, whether their appearance corresponds with the relocation of the cemeteries, marking a passage to another era. B, whether the local preferences played a role in the choice of particular Attic shapes. And C, their influence on local pottery production. SAPE is used as the main tool for the study and not the decoration, since its role as trade factor is considered of prime importance. At several sites where both the cemeteries of the early and late Iron Age have been brought to light, relocation to a nearby site is observed in the mid-6th century.
Anna?
The necropolis of the...
Anna,
yes?
can you hear me just a moment, please? What slide are you showing now in your presentation?
The third one, I think.
Because we are watching the first one.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, try to pass to the next slide in order to see if we can follow your presentation.
No, as I see, you can't.
Maybe you can try to start again with, or reinstate the...
Will I stop share and try again?
Maybe to close the PowerPoint and open again.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry for inconvenience. Another one. Okay.
Can you see it?
Just a moment. Yes. Can you try to advance in your presentation? Okay.
Okay.
Continue for the point that...
But I think you can't see the next... I don't know why.
Anna, are you using your mouse?
Yes.
Can you try with the arrows on your on the board of your computer?
I will try, thank you. But now, is it working?
No, it's not working. It was working for me, but not.
No,
it's not working. Don't worry. Maybe you can choose to the next slide with the to push your control in the slide number 2, for example.
I have moved on, and yes, but you can't see it.
No.
I don't know why.
You have your presentation on PDF?
No, I don't have it on PDF.
No. Okay. Now it's working.
Wait, if I close it. You can see it?
Yes, we are in the slide.
Maybe if I don't put it in full screen, then...
Okay,
okay. I won't put it on full screen.
Now it's working. Don't try to the full screen. Continue as you are showing now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, here you see the main points that I will try to analyze. So I will go on from here. Is it okay? Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. At several sites where both the cemeteries of the early and late Iron Age have been brought to light, relocation to a nearby site is observed in the mid-6th century. The necropolis at Nea Philadelphia. No. Sorry, the necropolis at Nea Philadelphia, northwest of Thessaloniki, where the Nares Mount and the homonymous table are located, is a typical example that strengthens this point. Southwest of the table, the early cemetery was investigated, dated from the 9th to the early 6th century. The archaic cemetery, located immediately south of the table, is spatially separated with a 100-meter long vacant zone. At a short distance east, where the settlement on the Daoud Bali table is located, the early cemetery is revealed northwest of the settlement, whereas the late archaic and classical necropolis extends at a short distance north. The cemetery of Archaic Syndos is located is related to the double trapeze of Enchialos and to be divided to the so-called Southern Cemetery, including 2 early Iron Age pit graves and several graves of the late Iron Age, differing significantly from those of the Northern Cemetery at a neighboring site where the deceased were accompanied with abundant grave offerings from various production centers. The Southern Cemetery ceased to be used in 560, when the Northern Cemetery functioned. Approaching Thessaloniki, in the area of the Mount Trapeza-Lebet, the early Western Cemetery and the late Eastern Cemetery are investigated. The Western Cemetery Stavroupoli extends in a hill rising between 2 streams west of the Mount and northwest of the table. At the Eastern Cemetery, Polychni, located on a natural plateau between the Mount and the table, graves dating from the Archaic period were excavated. At the northern eastern part of Thessaloniki, in the area of Tumba, the homonymous mound and table stand. The cemetery of the 8th century was developed at a distance of 400 to 800 meters between the ravines in the southwest and the southeast of the settlement. From the 7th to the early 5th century, the cemetery was organized to a site closer to the settlement. At the coastal zone of the head of the Gulf at Karaburnaki, where the homonymous table with early Iron Age traces of habitation and the nearby bound further east, where the archaic settlement developed, part of the early cemetery was discovered south of the table, while the archaic cemetery is located east of the mound. Further east, the necropolis associated with Thermaic extends under the modern settlement. A relocation of the late burials from north to south took place. In the western part of in the southern part of the Anthemus Valley, in the area of Suroti, an ancient settlement identified it with the homonymous city was developed on the hills of Mount Calabros. The cemetery is located north of the settlement. Judged by the fragmentary data at our disposal, it appears that the location of the early cemetery remains unknown, since only 2 out of the 530 investigated graves are dated to an early phase, containing a pendant semicircular skyphos and a local spouted fiale. The last site in this regional survey of great importance for the study of the regional burial customs is the archaic Northern Cemetery of Agios Athanasios at the west, related to the Topsin table, and the archaic necropolis of Agia Paraskevi in the vicinity of Suroti. No burials of the early Iron Age have been found. It is apparent that the majority of necropolis around the Thermaic Gulf were relocated in the mid-6th century. The socio-cultural factors that led to this relocation is difficult to be discerned, but it seems beyond doubt that it coincided with imports from Attica and other large centers of southern mainland and East Greece. In order to proceed to the second aspect of the present study, whether the choice of particular Attic shapes was according to the local preferences, it should be examined to what extent vessels deposited as funerary gifts form an almost standard customary selection of the available ceramic repertoire and not a random choice. Several shapes For example, kitchen utensils were strictly excluded from burial rituals. A funeral assemblage of symbolic vessels appear as a long-lasting funerary traditional ritual or as symbolic tokens expressing a local identity. In the aforementioned early Iron Age necropolis, vessels used as grave gifts during the 8th, early 7th century belong mainly to indigenous ceramics, consisted mostly of open shapes, handmade, double-handled, single-handled spouted fiale or cantharoid and closed vessels, jugs with a cutaway neck. In cemeteries of the central and eastern part of the Gulf, such as Polychni, Karabouraki, Thermaic, and Suroti, a few pendant semicircle skiffy coexisted with handmade vases. Miniature amphoras or jugs could have been used as oil containers. In the 8th century, monochrome pottery represented by symbolic vases appeared. The most favored shapes are stemless cups and single-handled spouted fiale, followed in popularity by mugs or small olpe, variation of the earlier handmade ones, with which are rarely combined as grave goods. It is considered a luxurious local pottery from the late geometric to the late archaic period. Its distribution in archaic cemeteries varies. At the western part of the Gulf, in Syndos, Agios Athanasios, Philadelphia, it is absent from the cemeteries where Attic vessels are present. At the east side, in Karabouraki and Thermi, it appears in cemetery where Attic imports are also present. Further east, the Anthemus Valley, monochrome ware is totally absent from archaic graves. The emphasis given to the symposium in the context of funerary customs is apparent. The main grave goods are drinking vessels and spouted fiale, which probably served as a large wine mixing shape. Spouted fiale, double-handled fiale, cups and jugs are present in graves individually or as complete symposium set. Perfume bottles, local or Corinthian, are much less frequent. A question of high importance is whether the Attic ware conformed to the regional burial customs or they transformed them. Corinthian imports, especially Arivali, appeared early as grave goods. The first Attic imports appeared during the first quarter of the 6th century. Data from other Mediterranean sites indicate that this was the period that the trade of Attic products began. The identification of the presence of Attic pottery at the sites of the Thermaic Gulf between mid-6th and early 5th century is probably also connected to the institution of Regulus by Pisistratos. In the earlier southern cemetery at Syndos, early and middle Corinthian Arivali are present, whereas the Attic pottery is represented only by Plimohoe. In the northern cemetery, 56 graves are datable to the archaic period. Corinthian vases remain numerically superior, amounting to 89. The appearance of Attic pottery is also quite intense. 56 black-figured and black-laced are included. Locally manufactured vessels are restricted in only 20 graves. There are 23 local vases in total. Antique vessels and local coexist in only 12 graves. The rest 8 graves furnished with local products included also Corinthian or Ionic vases. The earliest imported Corinthian vases date back to the Middle Corinthian period. The earliest Attic imports are a Comast group cup, a black-laced amphoriscos, and a lekithos. It seems intrinsically important that the earliest imported shapes concerns a symposium vessel and oil containers. The majority of Attic vessels belong to the Mediterranean white poplar products of the late 6th or early 5th century. Stemmed and stemless cups, leading number around 530 cups, skyphos, and lekithos appear. The symbolic set includes a crater, a ninohoe, an olpe, and a stemmed plate. The remaining 17 Attic vases concern oil containers. Excavation records about Agios Athanasios and their Philadelphia findings do not provide sufficient information about the pottery assemblages. Therefore, general evaluation and statistical analysis is not possible. At the northern archaic cemetery of Agios Athanasios, in a total of 21 graves, Corinthian exalpta and condyle dominate, followed by Attic black-figured vases and Ionic cups. In Philadelphia, common grave goods are vases of Attic, Corinthian, Ionian, and local origin. Cups, skiffy, and canthory relate to the consumption of wine and lekith oil containing scented oils. At the cemetery of Deimos, in the inlet of the Gulf, the earliest graves date to the 6th century. A small group is furnished only with local vessels. The majority of the graves dated in the late Archaic period are furnished with Attic black figured Ionic and Corinthian. In the cemetery of Tumba, Corinthian vases appear early in the 6th century. Until the beginning of the 5th century, Attic vases are limited to the 3 black laced cups. By the end of the century, there is a substantial increase in the amount of Attic black figure, palmed cups type C, CHC group skiffy, and Lankan cup group skiffy. At Karaboutnaki, Attic vases predominate, followed by Corinthian, while local ceramics are quite limited. More specifically, 48 Attic vases, 28 Corinthian, and 17 local are identified. Drinking vessels, various cups and skiffy dominate. Craters and lekythoi appear in later graves. There are also 2 plimohoi and a white grounded alabaster. In the cemetery of modern Thermaic, Attic vases appear shortly before the middle of the 6th century. Until the first quarter of the 5th century, black-figured column craters of small size, lekythoi and skiffy, were dominant, while cups are not so common. From the second quarter of the 6th century onward, perfume bottles such as an amphorisco similar to the above mentioned from Synthos appear. In the last quarter of the 6th century, Attic black lace cups prevail. A comparable situation is observed in Suroti, where Attic imports outnumber the Corinthian. Cups of type C, Rhynia or Lanka type, and lekythoi are common finds. In Agia Paraskevi, the assemblage of grave offerings includes 110 Attic black figured and 37 black lace vases so far published. Corinthian imports are 3 times more than the Attic. Column craters prevail, skiffy are following, cups and tinohoi are also favorite forms, while amphora and hydra are each represented by a unique specimen. It is evident that Attic symphotic vases prevail, whereas only a single oil container is included. The earlier Attic imports are 14 column craters associated to lithos and the horsehead amphora dated to mid-6th century. In the third quarter of the 6th, crater still remains the most favored Attic shape. After 530, crater is still a common import, but also other shapes appear, xenohoi, skiffic, and caps, among with which the band type prevails. Almost half of the graves were furnished. Almost half of the graves were furnished only with imported vases, 155 with imported and local, while 61 only local. Corinthian vases are often combined with local, but the Attic outnumber. 13 black-figured craters, 2 in Ohoi, 7 black-figured skiff in the cup are included. The imported Attic black-glazed vessels outnumber the black-figured. There are 10 cups, 9 buttons, cup skiffy, a mug, a stamped plate, 5 amphorisci, a type blipimohoi, and a miniature one. In burials where Attic and local vases coexist, local inohoi jugs predominate versus Attic, whereas Attic craters outnumber the local. Evidently, Attic imported ware, mainly of symbolic character, was adjusted to the local burial customs. Perfume bottles, lekythoi and miniature amphorisci, in low numbers possibly reflect the continuity of the earlier local tradition represented by a few miniature local vases of the 8th century and a few Corinthian arrivals. In the above cemeteries, local grey or banded exalyptra, cantheroid cotyle, jugs with a cutaway neck and levis, probably a mixing pole, also accompanied the deceased. Corinthian imitation in funerary context prevail. The incorporation of Attic vases into the regional burial customs resulted in the suppression of the earliest monochrome XL luxury pottery still present in settlement deposits. Its appearance in graves is restricted in modest numbers and never in combination with Attic. On the contrary, there is a weak presence of monochrome pottery with Corinthian vases. Local cotyle and exalyptra correspond to the prominent Corinthian vessels without precisely copying the shape or the evolution of the original form. Though abundant Attic vases were imported from the mid-6th century onwards, Attic influence on local pottery production is not overwhelming. The local workshops adopted various shapes without reproducing their counterparts in detail. Moreover, Local potters, aiming to render their products competitive to imports, adapted several features of their parallels. Local jugs with a cutaway neck did not cease to be manufactured, but a low ring base was added, and the straight vertical handle became concave at the junction to body. The most prevalent impact on the local pottery was the adoption of the column crater. Its reproduction in Macedonia can be associated with the Attic black-figured specimens often found in the 6th century burials, as there are no corresponding Corinthian imports. Column craters gradually substitute for one of the most traditional local shapes, the spouted fiale. Examples from Agia Paraskevi, with plates covering the handles, are either close to Attic counterparts with a strongly widened base and enhanced junction of neck and body, or distant from the Attic standards with a neck forming a single contour with a body and a disc base. There were also manufactured grey specimens and with painted decoration. The influence of Attic ceramics on local pottery is also discernible in other grave vessels. Trefoil in Ohoi with a plastic ring on the cylindrical neck is reminiscent of Attic specimens despite the significant clear differences. A more spherical body without a sloping shoulder and a wider base. An example from Agia Paraskevi probably imitates the black figure of the Ragusa group. The two plain trefoil in Ohoi from the same cemetery with an inverted handle find close parallels in Attic black glazed examples from the Athenian agora. Black glazed imitations are closer to Attic specimens. The earliest are cups of type C, a local black glazed production seems to have increased at the beginning of the 5th century. Several stemless cups with a slightly concave lip and a low disc foot appear. Their coarse fabric with several inclusions and the lack of added red lines emphasizing the form differentiates them from the Attic prototypes. The above contextual analysis envisages the general trend of using Attic symbolic vases and oil containers in grave goods from the mid-6th century BC, although symposium shapes in funerary contexts in Attic are limited. Adhering to the persistent local burial practices and rituals, they replaced earlier local symbolic vessels and Corinthian local perfume bottles. The only profound change concerning the funerary rituals was the adoption of the Corinthian exalytron, although it was not destined for a funerary purpose at Corinth. In general, only several features of Attic ceramics were incorporated to the traditional shapes. The more precise copies are associated with black lace types. The overview of Attic imports and their distribution reveal prosperity of the settlements around the Thermaic Gulf. The fact that despite monochrome pottery was still produced by the time Attic imports appeared, but they never coexisted in combination with the relocation of necropolis indicates a probable transformation in the structure of the communities, possibly associated with the institution of various colonies in northern Greece. Thank you and sorry for the inconvenience.